Last week, we started talking about a guy by the name of Nehemiah. And we're going to talk a little bit about him before we dive into some things this morning. And so we'll be in Nehemiah chapter 2 to kind of recap if you forget what we talked about or you weren't here last week. Or if you're like Chuck from the early service, he says whenever I open my mouth, all he hears is blah, 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 blah. I love Chuck. He's my buddy. But Nehemiah was the king's cupbearer and just a regular guy who God put a burden in his heart and he decided to do something about it. We talked about being an ordinary difference maker and that God uses ordinary people all the time to do extraordinary things. And if he's burdened your heart for something, you need to act upon that. That God often uses emotion to kind of give us a kickstart. It's a good starter, but not a good sustainer. We see Nehemiah when he hears about the walls of Jerusalem and what they look like and that they're broken down and his people are under pressure and distress. He cries. There's an emotional attachment there. But then he prays, he knows where his strength comes from. So he knows where his resources are. And then he decides to take action. So an ordinary difference maker, you can watch a sermon on our website if you want to get the full detail. They have a burden placed by God. They pray and draw the resource from the Lord. And then at some point in time, they have to act. You have to do something. And so when we pick up here in Nehemiah chapter 2, Nehemiah has gotten approval from King Artaxerxes to travel from the capital and head to Jerusalem. It's about an 800-mile trip. It's going to take him several months. And now he finally arrives, and this is where we pick up in Nehemiah 2, verse 11. So I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Then I arose in the night, I and a few men with me. I told no one what God had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem, nor was there any animal with me except the one on which I rode. And I went out by night through the valley gate to the serpent well and the refuse gate, and viewed the walls of Jerusalem which were broken down, and its gates were burned with fire. Then I went up onto the fountain gate, into the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal under me to pass. So I went up in the night by the valley and viewed the wall. Then I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I had done. I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or the others who did the work. Then I said to them, "You see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lies waste and its gates burned with fire. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer be a reproach." And I told them of the hand of my God, which had been good upon me, and also the king's words that he had spoken to me. So they said, let us rise up and build. And they set their hands to this good work. Nehemiah shows up with a burden in his heart. Again, he's a butler. He's not a masonry worker, so building the wall is probably something new to him, as far as we know. And he is determined, though, that God has called him to do something, this ordinary guy, and he doesn't know all the details of how it's going to work out, but this is what God called him to do, and so he's going for it. He's taking a risk. He's taking a step of faith. He gets there, and he goes to view the walls. Think about what that night was like for Nehemiah. It says he goes to the valley, and he views the walls broken down. Do you know what I think Nehemiah saw? He saw those walls already repaired in his mind, right? He saw the city bustling with activity and getting back to some normalcy because now they have protection. I mean, back then, walls were incredibly important to your existence. And so Nehemiah finally tells them, hey, here's the problem. Our people are in great distress. This is what God has called me to do. To rebuild the wall. Nehemiah couldn't do it by himself. I mean, this butler couldn't just show up and decide, I'm just going to get some rocks and get to work. No. He laid out to these guys what was in his heart and in his mind already. He showed them that the walls were already built. They just had to get started on it. He said, let me tell you of the hand of my God. He laid the vision out and he talked about how great his God was. And you know what? How the people responded? They said, let's do it. They put their hands to this work. Today I hope to lay a vision before you. I hope you can see what I already see. You know, I told you earlier service, I feel like that It's 5 years ago, and we're meeting in my brother's living room, and it's our first core group meeting, and I'm casting a vision to the 13 other people that are there, saying, hey, God's going to do something that's bigger than us. I already saw all of you. I knew you. I didn't know your name, but I saw you. I saw God doing a work that is greater than one person or even 14 people. And that night, they also saw the same thing. And so we're basically having a little core group meeting here, okay? And I'm hoping to relate to you what God has placed in my heart and show you a vision that it's already done in my mind, but I hope you leave here saying, let us rise up and build. Let us do something that is greater than ourselves. That's my hope. That's my prayer. In Proverbs it says this. Bring that Proverbs verse up. There we go. Where there is no vision, the people cast off restraint. But happy is he who keeps the law. Proverbs 29:18. Go to the next slide, please. Vision is the bridge between the present and the future. Without it, we perish or go unrestrained. It's like we don't have any direction of where we're going. We just kind of go everywhere. Next slide. Those without vision spend their lives taking the path of least resistance as they try to avoid discomfort. Let me just put it this way. Churches without a vision will take the path of least resistance as they try to avoid discomfort, because what Nehemiah proposed to these individuals looked a lot like work, looked a lot like sacrifice. And that's the thing. If your vision is from God, it's going to involve those two things. Work, sacrifice. I mean, you're going to have to partake. Nehemiah couldn't do this on his own. So, I'm going to share some different stats with you, and I want you to understand my heart when I talk about numbers, because I don't ever want our faith family, I don't want you to feel like a number, like Jacob is number 170. No, when I see a number, I see a Bethany, or I see a Jim. I see the people that's represented, okay? I'm very cautious about how I present numbers, but it's how I'm going to be able to gauge some of these things for you. And also, some of the growth of Bridgeway isn't numerical. In fact, it can't be counted. How do you count someone who's matured in their faith from 2 years ago to now, or made Christian friends they never had before, or taken steps of faith? And you can't put those on paper, all right? So know my heart when I'm sharing this with you. But anything that is alive grows, okay? Anything that's alive grows. And Bridgeway is alive. And we're kind of at a crossroad where we need to decide, are we going to be a church that hits cruise control because people still show up, we have money in the bank, we don't have any debt, and, we're in a good position? Do we hit cruise control and say, man, we're doing all right? The question we should always be asking ourselves is, what are we doing that requires faith? To hit cruise control is basically to say, to hell with everybody else, we're good. That's not us, right? That should not be us. It should be to heaven with everybody else, right? That's where we want them to end up. We want to be a church that is passionate about serving our Lord and reaching our community. And it's very easy to hit cruise control. Why? Because that's comfortable. Building a wall is uncomfortable. Ask Nehemiah. So, let me lay some things out for you. Bring that next slide up, please. I'll throw some numbers out. This is just like a guide of if you're gauging how a church is growing, if it's doing well or doing not. So poor growth would be like 2%. Good growth, you guys see all of that. Now, keep in mind, a couple things I want to share with you in looking at this is, according to churchleaders.com, 90% of the churches in America are under 2% of growth. Most churches are declining. In fact, another article I read, and again, this is not me just making up stuff, most churches are not keeping up with the pace of growth in their community. What do we mean by that? Amelia has grown 3.2% from the last census. Our county has grown 3%. Rule of thumb, you want your church growth to be higher than that, okay? 90% of churches are below that. I can't speak to why 90% of churches aren't growing, but Bridgeway is, by God's grace. Let's not get egotistical and think it's about a pastor or about a group of people. It's about our God, okay? Let's keep our focus. It's easy to let things get to your head, all right? We don't want to do that. So, this is our little guide to kind of give you an idea of how Bridgeway has grown. Go to the next slide, please. So from 2013 to 2014, we grew 19%. And then when we added our second service from 2014 to 2015, we grew 28%. Now, let me just lay this out. Once we started hitting 150 and 160, growth slowed down. Why? We didn't change our approach to outreach. We didn't change how we operate. We became the goldfish that's in a tank. He's only going to get so big, right? I mean, you notice when we created more space with the second service that we had exponential growth. And then when we kind of stayed where we're at in our building, if you go to the next slide, it slowed down to 9%, which percentage-wise is still really good, but we're that goldfish, and we're in a small tank. Something's got to give. Now, it went to 6%, but we also planted a church, which is a huge step. It was our last big step of faith. We sent 30 people to go start Bridgeway Riverside. And keep in mind, whenever the Lord lays it on our heart and provides the right man and the right family to start a church, we will do it again when he gives the green light. We will never let finances or how many people are at our church dictate whether or not we're going to obey God, because God owns everything and God is in charge of everybody, okay? We're going to freak out about those things. So if God challenges us to start another church, that is exactly what we'll do. And furthermore, I told this to the early service, there's no restriction on how many of you all can go and start a church. When we started Riverside, we just said, if God lays it on your heart, then go, because staying here would be a mistake. And as a pastor, if God laid it on Kathy's heart to go start a church, with a core group, who am I to say, no, Kathy, you need to stay here because we don't want to lose 50 people. You guys aren't my people. You're God's people. I do have a certain responsibility to God and how I pastor, but if God challenges you to go and help start a church, rock on. It's however many the Lord decides he needs. He needed 30 people for Riverside. That's what he got. So I wanted to say that. And it's also, I don't want this to sound like I'm putting other churches down. I don't know what all the other churches do. But to be 4 years old and start a church is a big deal. It really is. And by God's grace, we were able to do that. And by his grace, maybe we'll get to do it again. But growth has slowed down. We're at a crossroads and we need to do something. What we need to do is we need to anticipate growth. Think of what the next 2 or 3 steps are. But our growth hasn't just been this. Bring up the next slide. We've seen 111 professions of faith, 74 baptisms. Those are stories. Every one of those numbers is a story. Some of those stories are in this crowd right now. Some of them are at the early service. Some of them are watching us online. They are stories. That's the growth I get excited about. When you're a pastor and you get obsessed with numbers, because I've been there, you get bummed when you have a low Sunday. Like, oh, nobody likes us anymore kind of thing. God has really changed my heart away from that mentality, because it went from that, if we have a low Sunday, and it happens, I'm just happy to get to worship with some of y'all. If it was just me and Brandon, I really don't want to worship with Brandon, but we would do it. No. So, this is what I get excited about. The stories. I think of Bill Steinker. I mentioned him in the early service. Most of you don't know Bill. Bill's been in heaven for a little while now. Bill was brought here by one of his friends that I went to church with in Wilmington. Bill was not a believer. He had horrible experience with church early in his life, and that kind of set the pace for him when it came to faith. He didn't trust any of us. But Bill was sick, and he started thinking seriously. Now, he made this clear to me. He said, I'm not looking into this just because I'm going to die. I want to know if this is true or not. He said, I'm not going to give you some bedside confession. I want to know if this is real. And Bill came to the saving knowledge of Christ after several months. Now, when I met Bill, he had 6 months to live, so I think it was even maybe after the 6-month mark he started following. I don't remember. I was close to it, but he wanted to know if this was real. And then Bill's baptisms was one of the more impactful on me because it was painful for Bill. He had cancer in his body, Parkinson's. It was painful for him. And I can remember him sitting in the baptismal tank, but he was so determined. I'm getting baptized. And he was gritting his teeth in pain, but he wanted to do it. There's more Bills out there. Linda Carmack came to faith months before she entered heaven. She got baptized a month before meeting Jesus. There's more Lindas out there. Tommy, how long have you been out of church, man? How many years was it? About 10? There's more Tommy Webbs out there. There are more stories outside these walls that need to be told. And we're in a position where our facilities no longer facilitate. We want more people to be plugged into this faith family, more people to plug into one of our classes, to meet people in this church, to realize not all Christians, we're not all crazy, and we're not all jerks. We do love you and care for you and want you to know Jesus as we know Jesus. We got to think not what the next step is for this church, but what the next 2 or 3 steps are. We need to anticipate growth. Buildings are tools. That's all they are. Let's not ever get to a place where we're worshiping a building and thinking we're the greatest church in the world because we have a cool building. It's not the case. We're the coolest church because we have Jesus. And any church that has Jesus is all right in my book. A church isn't a building, right? Buildings are tools. And as I was using this analogy, sharing with other people, you can hammer a nail with a rock, but it's more effective if you have an actual hammer, right? And the tool we have here at Bridgeway is a rock. We're driving nails, but it's only going to get us so far. We need a better tool. Facilities are meant to facilitate, and our facilities are no longer facilitating unless we want to stay where we're at and hit cruise control. We're the goldfish in the tank, and we have to decide, are we going to get a different tank, or are we going to just be happy right where we are? So, we will be moving. Where? I'll share that in just a second. Some of the catalysts for us moving, one, obviously, is mainly the size issue. We went back to a Sunday school model because that worked for us. Some of my friends are just killer at small groups. It didn't really work for us so well, so we decided we would go back to a Sunday school model. We were only having about 5 to 8 adults engage in adult Bible study on a weekly basis when we had it on Sunday nights. Since we've moved to Sunday school, we have anywhere from 40 to 50 on a given Sunday. I have a class in my office. We have a class in the teen area. We kind of overtook their area. We have a class in here for our adults. And the problem is, if you were to add like 2 more people in my office, it's crowded. When you get about 15 to 17 in where the other young adults meet, it gets crowded. And here, you've got plenty of space for our 40 and older crowd, but the problem is, we don't want to have one class of 40 people. When they get to 15 or 20, we need to start thinking about splitting that class up because we want people to engage, and in a smaller setting, people are more likely to engage. Otherwise, it's just this massive group, and that's not how we want it to operate. So we have no room for our classes to grow. Furthermore, our children's space is incredibly inadequate for the amount of kids that show up to Bridgeway. Don't believe me? Then stick around for all of our kids' ministries next week, and then you tell me how it is for you. The space is inadequate. And we want our kids to grow up knowing Jesus. And we need to expect that God is going to send more people who have kids to Bridgeway. And how can we minister to them? So the reality is we're out of space. And we have to do something about that. Or we could choose to do nothing. I just think that's a really horrible idea. And not an option. Really, I said we could choose to do that. We're not going to do nothing. We're going to do something. We're not going to be that church that hits cruise control. I mean, if you want to be a part of a church that hits cruise control, then go find one. I'm sure there's plenty somewhere. Nor am I going to be a pastor of a church that hits cruise control. That's not what God called me to do, and not what he called you to do. And Nehemiah showed up to build a wall, not Lincoln Logs, right? He wants to get something done for the glory of God. I want us to get some more done for the glory of God. He's already done great things. But there are people outside these walls that need the message of Christ. So we're moving. We've looked at some different options. Believe me. I mean, like waking up in the middle of the night thinking, okay, Lord, we got to go somewhere. There's no place to go. Let me just kind of give you the options real quick. Oh, I forgot Pastor Duke's quote. Sorry, Pastor Duke, if you're watching. But you're probably preaching, so. The church exists for those who aren't here yet. That's why we exist. And there's plenty of people that aren't here yet. Next slide, I forget. Okay, options. We looked at merging with a local church. This was a few years back when our growth really just exploded and we were out of room. We looked at merging with a local church, but that didn't go any further than a conversation. And it wasn't like on the top of our list because merging is difficult. And it was just a conversation. Didn't go any further than that. And so we just moved beyond that. Okay. Next option. We looked at leasing something around 10,000 square feet. On the strip, we want to be in this area. This is the area God called us to. And so the prices average between $4,000 and $8,000, depending on where you were at on 125. And 10,000 square feet is only about 3,000 more square feet than what we have. This is about 5,500 square feet, and then we have about 1,500 square feet next door at the student and office area. So to move to somewhere 3,000 square feet, it would be around $6,000. That is before, let's say we leased something. You still have to remodel it. You have to hire an architect because you're turning that place into a meeting place, and so it has to meet certain codes. It would not be cheap to do that. And I don't want us to put ourselves in a financial position where we're so consumed with debt for a stinking facility that we're not ministering to the people that need to be in that facility. There are too many times where a church finds themselves spending more of their resources on a building than they do the people they're trying to reach, and we don't want to put ourselves in that position. So leasing was not really a good option. Next option. We looked at buying this place. It's for sale. It's been for sale for 5 years. I don't know if you guys knew that or not. It's always been for sale. It would be $400,000. And we would have to add on to it, if we could add on to it. See, this building, obviously it's really old. It's built in 1855. Yeah. Think about it. They were having prayer meetings for President Lincoln, right? I pray for the president in this building. Isn't that crazy? I do get kind of creative in my imagination, thinking of all the people who have come to Christ in this facility. This is, it's historic. But this building was grandfathered in. You're not allowed to build something this close to the road. You have to be at least 50 feet from the road. Furthermore, by law, you're not allowed to add on to a building that is this close to the road. You would need special permission if you could get that permission. So spending $400,000 for 1 acre where we're landlocked and it's horrible to pull in here, you guys know that, and not even being for sure we can add on to it, because if we can't add on to this, what do we do? We build over here and then take up what little parking we have? It just wasn't a good option, but we need to move. So we looked at the next option. We looked to build something. We met with a church consultant, and it would cost about $1.5 million to build a 10,000 square foot facility. So for 3,000 more square feet, we would get to have $1.5 million in debt. Yay! Furthermore, you have to pay the utilities on that, right? Larger building, bigger heat bill. And all I saw were like just handcuffs. How are you going to be able to do ministry? Don't go to the next slide yet, Tommy. Unless you already did. You the man. See, Chuck would have gone to the next slide. But that's Chuck. So the next slide is what we're going to be doing. This is the step we're going to take. And I'll just lay it out for you. Here we go. Option we considered was to rent the Amelia Elementary School. We'll have access to 20,000 plus square feet. It'd be an extra $1,000 a month in rent and about $30,000 up front. So we would quadruple what we have here. It's an extra $1,000 a month. That might sound like a lot, but it's not. It's not. It's like $250 a week. In fact, according to our finance team, like where's that going to come from? This is a piece of cake. According to our finance team, of the people who could give at Bridgeway, and again, I don't know who it is, because I'm not going to do that. That way you can be like, the preacher doesn't like me because I don't give. No, that's not it. Of the people that could give at Bridgeway, 70% give nothing. Nothing. Not even like $5. Means 30% of those who call this their faith family support what's going on here. I find that unacceptable. But the thing is, when you have a vision and you believe it is from God, you should have no problem asking people to jump on board and help you with it. It costs resources for Nehemiah to build a wall. It costs money, time, effort. And so let's take that 70%. If 20 people in that 70% gave $50 a month, $12.50 a week, it's covered. It's not difficult. It's a matter of obedience. Yes, God gives us our resources. It's not about how much you give to God, it's how much you keep for yourself, right? We need to be generous in the stuff God has already given us. In my family, we will increase our giving as well. I'll challenge the 30% as well, because I believe in what we're doing here. $30,000, what's that for? We will need that $30,000. We're working with a company called Portable Church Industries because we are going to need things fashioned in a way that can be completely portable. It would be a trailer that would have different things set up so we can, for example, you'll have one box, that'll be children's ministry. You take that box out, you set it up, and boom, you've got a class. We need to be able to be portable, and that will cost us up front, and having all the proper equipment to set up and tear down in a quick manner. So that's where that $30,000 comes in, and we're going to raise that. We're going to have some special days set aside where we're going to challenge you to go above and beyond what you regularly give. If you don't give, we're going to challenge you to give. The first day for that's going to be the last Sunday of February, and then we'll have a few more Sundays plugged in. But we want to be able to buy this stuff and have everything we need to move in. Again, I believe in this. I hope you're seeing what I see. I already see people who aren't here yet that we can minister to, that we can impact. But we don't have the facilities to do that unless we want to hit cruise control. I'll give you a couple pictures. If you've not been to Amelia Elementary, it's where we had Christmas and Easter. It's where we'll have Easter this year. That's the outside. As we go from having 64 parking spaces to 146. So we'll have all the parking we're going to need. That's the entryway. So as you're looking at this, straight ahead is going to be the children's ministry. The restrooms are right there. To the left will be nursery and worship. To the right, we're going to have classrooms, and that'll be areas for Sunday school. Do the next slide. Bathroom, you know what that's for. Next slide. I'm going to block the camera. I'm going to stand off to the side here. This will be broken up by dividers. All of our children's ministry will be in one spot. It'll be the gymnasium. All right? And there's also a playground, if you bring that up, that's fenced in right off of the gymnasium. Let's see what else we got. There's classrooms we're going to be using for Sunday school. At that one, there's the music room. And then the next slide, that's where the nursery is. If you guys have been with us for Christmas or Easter, you know it's a perfect setup because the nursery is right next to the auditorium. And so babies are real close if we need mom and dad. Auditorium, you guys, this was Christmas a few months ago. They can look like that every Sunday. See, I believe that. All right, I think that's it. What do we got next? I forget. Okay, the cons. It's going to cost more money. It's going to be more work. I don't know if that's a con necessarily, honestly, because when you're trying to do something that's bigger, it is going to cost more money and it's going to be more work. Let me give you the pros, though. It's going to be an increase in involvement. We're going to need more people to help. We're going to have to set up and tear down every single Sunday, which means we're going to have at least 3 teams of people, at least 3. That, for example, let's say that Gary, our deacon, is in charge of a team. His team will serve for a month. They will set up and they will tear down. It'll be a long Sunday for them, but then they have 2 months off after that. So we're not killing our workers, right? But we're going to need many hands on deck. You know, Pastor Duke told me this, and I love this quote. He said there are 2 types of people among the church: those who make church happen and those who don't. And you have to decide which one you're going to be. Those who make it happen or one who doesn't. And so we're going to challenge you in the coming months. Hey, we're going to have different teams, and we're going to need your help. You might say, well, Brent, I'm not experienced. And Nehemiah was a professional wall builder too, right? So, well, I can't do this team. That's cool. We will have another team that we can fit you in real nice, all right? It's going to be an increase in involvement. We're going to need all hands on deck. And if you believe in the vision, if you believe in God bringing more people here, and people coming to Christ and growing in that faith and making friendships, it shouldn't be an issue. There'll be plenty of space. We will have all the room we will ever need. So what if we get to a capacity, Brent, we're just busting at the seams? Then by God's grace, we'll just start another church, right? We could do that. Bridgeway doesn't have to be the main hub for everybody to show up. I don't have to be the only preacher that they hear. God does speak through other people. And so we'll start another church. God will send the right man and the right family, and he'll collect the right team, and we'll get the people we really don't like and put them on that team and ship them all out. We're going to have one service. Yeah, you're actually going to get to know people that come at the 9 o'clock service. Because literally, there are people who've been coming for years, and they have no idea who certain people are at Bridgeway. Because for the past 3 years, we've had 2 services. Now, my brother Brian made a proposal that since I'm only preaching once, I should get a cut in pay. So, he's been excommunicated as of this morning. We don't have to worry about him anymore. We're going to have an updated facility. Amelia Elementary was built in 2010. And this was built before Lincoln died. All right? So, you get the point. We're going to save on utilities and upkeep. We don't have to pay a month worth of heat bill for a 20,000 plus square foot facility. We just pay our rent. If something breaks, we don't have to fix it. Unless you actually break it on purpose, then, yeah, sorry, Sean. It's coming out of your allowance, bud. But if their furnace goes out, Gary doesn't have to fix it. And he's excited back there. We would be in the community. It's a familiar facility. You know, I was talking to some of my pastor friends about how it worked for them meeting at a school, and they said, you know, if someone's new to faith or new to church, it's intimidating walking into a church building. But if they're going to a school, he said, we found that they know where the gym is, they know where the restrooms are, they're more comfortable because it's a familiar facility. That's where their kids go to school. So it does tear down a few walls that maybe people have when visiting a new church. We would have all the benefits of a 20,000 plus square foot facility and none of the debt. Thank you, Lord. Again, we don't want to tie ourselves up to where we can't do what we're meant to do because we bit off more than we could chew financially. We're not going to be swimming in a large amount of debt. We're going to be doing what we've always done, reach out to people. We already have office space. See, one of the issues when a church goes mobile is you have to have a place for offices or a place to have a Bible study. The building next door is not owned by the same people who own this building. The building next door is owned by the Circle Storage Company, and they let us use it for free. And they have for the past 3 years. And they have no plans in changing that agreement. So we already have places for offices. If you wanted a midweek Bible study, you meet next door. We've already got it, everything we need. We got plenty of storage if we need to have storage space. God's already taken care of those details for us because that's what he does. Now, we are talking with a ministry that might potentially take over this building. And that ministry has said if we ever need to use it, we can use it whenever we want. So, that's cool. I want to make sure I've crossed all my T's and dotted all my I's. It's going to be it's a step of faith. There's no guarantee this will work. But there's a guarantee that God will be with us. And we know if we do nothing, that's not the best option. If we try something and take a step of faith, what could the possibilities be? They could be huge. It could be massive. It could mean eternity for some people. We've got to get out of this fishbowl and get into a different one. No, we're not trusting in the bowl. We're trusting in the Lord who created it. But we can't hit cruise control. It's dangerous. Eternities are at stake here. And we refuse to do that. So our tentative date here to move is September 16th of this year. Yeah, we're going to be getting out of Dodge in September. That's after summer's over, school's in session, we're past all the holidays, everybody's getting back into a routine. We'll have our last service here, and then the 16th, we'll be ready to go. We want to have our $30,000 raised before then, so we buy all the equipment, the trailer involved that we need, and we'll do a couple dry runs of setup and tear down, so we kind of have a good idea of how long that will take. Someone was asking earlier about the service schedule and what that would look like. We will still have Sunday school. Worship will come after that. We're thinking, it depends on how long it takes us to set up and tear down, but it could, service times could be 9:30 Sunday school and 10:45 church, but there's nothing set when it comes to that. With that being said, I want to open it up for any questions that you have. Don't be shy. They had a lot of questions in the earlier service, and our children's workers they'll have to kill me later for going over it, but that's all right. So questions, hit me with them. I'm an open book. Matt.
What about a sign? We have to put that sign up and down every Sunday or every Saturday?
Yeah, we'll have a proper amount of signage. They will know that we're there. Obviously, we're not going to have a permanent sign like we do now, but the best form of advertising for Bridgeway isn't the sign at the end of our parking lot. It's you, okay? It's all of you. It's the best form of advertising, but we will have tons of signage that we'll set up each week.
Could we use their marquee? I mean, don't they have a big marquee there?
The digital marquee,
Right.
I don't know.
That,
We didn't really ask about that. That usually is for school events, and ours is not a school event necessarily, so I'm not sure. Make them difficult. Yes?
Well, we still need a cleaning crew.
No. You're retired. It's like, I have to clean 20,000 square feet. No, part of the contract you hire a janitor. That's required. So, there you go. Matt.
How long is the lease for?
There is no lease. It is open-ended. We couldn't come to the board and say, we need this for 5 or 10 years. That's not how the school functions. They are friends at Connect Christian. They've been doing it, I think, for 3 years at Withensville, Tabasco Elementary, and they've got a great relationship with the school. One of the questions in your earlier service were, well, could they just pull the rug out from under us? Sure. They could pull the rug out from under us in this building. We don't own this, so we rent it. But don't let that be a determining factor, freaking you out, because if that were to happen, it's not your problem, it's not my problem, it's God's problem. We're His church. And so I wouldn't freak out about that. Furthermore, Connect has been, Pastor Mike and Connect, they've kind of been the guinea pig for all this, and the school enjoys having them there. We've got a great relationship with Principal Ryle at the Amelia Elementary. In fact, he has said he looks forward to fostering our relationship and being able to be at the school. So we want the school, we want it to be a massive positive for them that we're there. And we're going to make sure it is. So, but there's always risk involved. I mean, that's where the faith comes in, right? And don't let that scare you. God owns everything, so we'll take care of it. Yeah, Carol.
You said there would be a huge trailer that would
Yes.
carry everything.
Mhm.
Will the trailer be left there?
No, we'll keep it over here at the offices. But we're working with Portable Church Industries. It'll be a customized trailer where setting up and tearing down is going to be a piece of cake. Because everything will have its place, be properly labeled, have its own box, and all our team's got to do is roll it out, set it up, tear it down, put it back. So,
And that includes all these chairs?
no, we're getting rid of these. Yes,
Be a different chair?
it would be a more uncomfortable chair. It will. But hey, I said you'd have to get uncomfortable, guys. Yeah, the school has some chairs that we might be able to use. But even if they didn't, we can't set these up and tear these down every week. They're not functional for that. So, any other questions? Hit me with it. I'm an open book. Yes.
Is there a plan to, maybe prior to August, are we going to go on canvas again? Or?
You mean as far as telling people about this? We'll be treating this as if we're starting the church brand new. Like when we first got to Amelia, none of y'all knew Bridgeway existed. So we had to do a lot of outreach. And the same thing, this summer especially, we're going to make it impossible for people not to know this is happening. We're going to be everywhere. So, good question. Keep them coming. No more, you got any real difficult ones? No. It's okay. All right.
What were some of the morning service questions that we didn't?
They were concerned about it not being like a set in stone lease. What were some of the other questions? Do you remember? That was one of the major
I
concerns.
think that was a major one. It was pretty small. People asked about signage. A lot of the same questions.
Yeah. So, you have a question, Sean? We'll still have youth group, bud. You'll still have your Sunday morning. It'll be in a classroom at the school, and then you'll still have your third Sunday of the month over there. So, having youth group in your music class, yeah, everyone looks forward to that.
What about a lawn?
Same setup. It'll be during Sunday school. We'll have tons of room, so they're not all running back here. It'll be a more functional space, but we'll still have Awana during Sunday school.
What's the vision for growth? What are you, do you have
Like
areas
numerically?
you're looking to grow?
I don't, if we were at 10% growth for the next 5 years, we'd be running around 250. I don't know the answer to that question. Here's the thing, when you do what you're supposed to do and trust God, you plant and you water, He brings the increase. There's going to be an increase, Aaron, and I don't know what that's going to be. It'll probably blow our minds, which will be fine with me. Yeah, Emily.
Alright, I need a new question, but if we start growing really big, what are the things on transportation that help us bring this together?
Well, we'll still have our van, so people still need a ride.
If we do,
We'll buy another van.
okay.
Yeah, we'll just keep going. People want to get here and all you need is a ride, we will get them a ride. Or y'all just pick them up on the way. You know, we do have some folks pick different people up and bring them to church.
Or a bus.
Or a bus. Go with that. Other questions?
Use one of the West Grandma buses.
Rick, were you stretching or were you raising your hand? Oh, okay, he's stretching. All right. Anything else? All right. Pray. God's going to show up. He's going to do some really big things. And then think about your level of involvement. When I say level of involvement, I mean that there has to be some level of involvement at all. No matter what stage you're at in your life, if you're a part of this faith family, you're going to be involved in some level. We got to get this wall built. Nehemiah needs some help. He did it in 52 days. By God's grace, this fall is going to be the greatest fall Bridgeway has ever seen. And God's going to do some cool stuff. All right?
Actually, before you pray,
Yeah.
could you guys hear the kids back here?
Yeah.
In the service? I was in the back and heard them. So they had to come down here to do an activity because they didn't have room upstairs. That's just a practical example of
Yeah.
kind of what we're talking about. You know, how much room up there for the kids.
It's not functional space.
Yeah, and they were trying to be quiet. Actually, that was going to be quiet.
Oh, yeah.
So at least there they'd be further away and have the gym.
Right, yes. Yes,
The
they
doors
will.
to be closed.
All right, well, let's bow together, church, and I want us to pray. And I want you to pray. Lord, how do you want me to serve in this capacity? I want you to be challenged to give financially, yes. Invest in this. Again, God gives us our resources to be used for the furtherance of His gospel and to invest in eternity. I know there's a stigma with churches where you think, oh, all the church wants is my money. That's not it. That's not it at all. We want you to be obedient to God and use your resources to further His message. And this is for us to invest in the lives of people in our community. And so, get involved financially. Get involved with your time. Get involved with your talents. Are you going to be one of those who make it happen or those who don't? And you have the choice there. Maybe you're here today, you're not a follower of Christ. I know this was casting a vision for what's next for Bridgeway, but if you want more information on what it is to follow Jesus, on your communication card, put your name and your phone number and mark on one information on becoming a Christian, and I'd love to speak with you, buy you lunch, answer any questions that you may have. I want you to pray. I'm going to bring and sing a verse or two, and just talk to the Lord about maybe some of your concerns, or did you catch this vision? Do you see what I see? Do you see what God has laid out?
Softly and tenderly, Jesus is calling for you and for me. See on the portals, He's waiting and watching for you and for me. Come home, come home, ye who are weary, come home, and earnestly, tenderly, Jesus is calling all sinners, come home.
Father, we thank you, God, there is a wall that needs to be built. There's a work to be done, and we know of the hand of our God, Lord. You've already blessed Bridgeway in so many facets, and we have no reason to think that you're going to stop. Lord, we want to be a church that is a movement, not a monument. We want to keep moving, keep reaching out, and loving people and sharing the love of Christ, the glorious gospel.